So we're bringing Katie Strang on. As promised, we wanted to get into the Hockey Canada situation, trial, story. And we wanted to do it with somebody who was there, who's far more educated on this subject than we are, because, you know, as much as we love our speculation on this show and we spout off about everything, this is one of those things that you just can't give a hot take on. So, Katie, welcome back to the show. It's been a few years. Obviously, we're big fans of yours. And, I mean, this has got to be, of all the things that you've done in your career, this has got to be one of the more memorable that I think you've probably gone through. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. I think trials generally are, just because they're like, you know, a pretty lengthy process where, you know, you see a story through start to finish and you see all the different sort of nuances and manifestations and vagaries of, you know, the life cycle of a story. And so certainly this, like I covered the Larry Nassar case, that's one that has stuck with me for many, many years. But this one will, be very memorable.
Now, before we get into like the actual trial and stuff, were you like living in a hotel in London for weeks or months at a time? Like, how did that work in your personal life?
Yeah, so I live in Michigan, which is actually not super far away. Like, I'm a 4-hour drive. So I would stay there during the week and drive home for like 36 hours for the weekend.
With kids.
Right, with kids.
Crazy.
So like, right, yeah. So just as soon as you get home, you're like getting asked for snacks, and
Jeez.
they don't care what you've been doing.
Yeah, where are my Dunkaroos?
Yeah.
And before we get into this in depth, obviously, I will present a trigger warning to anybody that may have may be adversely affected by this. We are going to get into some of the details here, so you know, just wanted to give you guys the heads up. And so, Katie, I think the first thing that we should talk about with this case and the verdict itself is it's one of the more unbelievable stories in the sense that it kind of completes itself as a circle. The fact that there is no jury for this trial and the fact that there is a judge who ultimately decides the fate of this trial kind of connect with each other because they're a big part of how this all happened. So I want to start the story from the beginning. And you were there. This trial started, and a lot of people have forgotten this, with 2 different juries being dismissed. And the first one was apparently because a lawyer approached one of the jurors at a sandwich shop across the street from the court. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because this is a bizarre scenario.
Yeah, and so this is interesting. When I was talking to Steve about coming on here, and I like mentioned this phrase that I always think of, which is that every marriage is a foreign country, meaning that like there's always like these sort of weird customs and nuances and you know, kind of like micro cultures within like a little ecosystem. And this trial was very much that. It was bizarre from the very, very beginning. You know, after the Crown gave their opening statement, so, you know, they had just impaneled a jury. And that process was, by the way, very fascinating to watch as an American because it's different. And I've only covered trials based in the US. So they impanel a jury. They go through the Crown's opening statement, which is essentially like a roadmap. Here's like sort of the contours of our case. Here's the roadmap of how we're going to, you know, prove our case and like the fundamental elements, and they're sort of foreshadowing themes that they are going to touch on and evidentiary elements to the case and so on and so forth. And so after the Crown's opening statement, which was pretty detailed and, you know, forecasted, like I said, a lot of the you know, sort of critical elements of the Crown's case, we like came back from lunch, and you have to understand it's like there's limited lunch options like in London that are near enough to the courtroom that you can go have lunch and come back in time. So there's like this food court essentially across the street, and a court officer had come back and said that a juror had, you know, escalated concerns about improper contact between defense counsel and one of the jurors, who then told another juror. Basically, like the interaction, as the juror described it, was that a defense counsel said, it seemed to be there was a lot of head nodding going on this morning. And so they bring in the juror to discuss that. They bring in the fellow juror that the juror had initially told, and the court services officer that escalated the concerns. And then so right away it was kind of off to the races about, the defense was pushing for a mistrial right away. And then the Crown was, wanted to preserve the jury and wanted to take more intermediate steps to potentially, question the juror further or figure out a way that maybe instructions could be assessed. But, the judge ultimately ruled that it would be improper to move forward with that jury because of the potential taint from the allegations toward defense counsel. So, they declare a mistrial and then they go right to impaneling a new jury that same day. And it was interesting because even that jury didn't necessarily know that there had been a mistrial. The publication ban that existed within this trial was interesting. I've never dealt with one of those. Again, before, we don't have that exact same thing in the US. But basically, you can't report anything unless a jury has heard it. So anything that happens outside the presence of a jury is kind of considered off limits. So it was this very weird suspension right off the top of there's this huge kind of drama and controversy. And you can kind of report a little of it because the judge has said a little bit to the jurors, but then she makes her final decision and you can report that. But then there's a new jury, but they can't know that it was right off the top, very, I think, stressful for everyone involved because you don't want to, you realize sort of how delicate the carriage of justice is. And you don't want to be the person to potentially scuttle what people have worked, many, many months to, I guess, put forth a case or defend a case.
Yeah. And I remember when the mistrial happened and people didn't understand what a mistrial was that week. And people were like, oh, so the case is over. All these guys are free.
Yeah.
And then everybody had to re-explain that, no, this thing's just keeping on going.
You had a question, Steve?
Oh, well, so your article with Dan Robson in The Athletic is so good. And it summarized, there are so many parts to the story that are so ridiculous and I've never heard of this sort of thing before. And I remember reacting to them at the time and then I had forgotten them. And this collection of paragraphs here says it all. It starts with, it was a circus almost from the start. During a 3-hour stretch early in the trial, one courtroom attendee would be arrested on suspicion of secretly recording proceedings with his smart glasses. Another attendee would be banished from the building for exploding at a reporter and blaming him for ruining those boys' lives. Later, a police officer would intercept a man for trying to find EM in the courthouse while she testified remotely. I don't need to continue with everything, but you mentioned, the malfunctioning HVAC system. Is this the most unorthodox trial you've ever covered?
Yes, without question.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the second jury, they get dismissed because, and this one, this is wild.
I don't understand this. As a layman, I don't understand this.
Base understanding for us, and you're gonna have to forgive me here because I am not coming at this with a surgical sort of thing. I don't understand this. The jury accused the defense lawyers of making fun of their appearance. Is that what happened?
That is what happened. They handed the judge a note, and the note essentially said, when we file in, we have noticed, I think they said on multiple occasions, a certain defense counsel mocking their appearance. And we find this conduct unprofessional and unacceptable, and it makes us uncomfortable.
And
the quote is, then on May 22nd, after EM finished 9 grueling days on the stand. So this is after she's done 9 days of testimony. A juror handed Kiviranta a note. Multiple jury members feel we are being judged and made fun of by defense lawyers Daniel Brown and Hillary Dudding. Every day when we enter the courtroom, they observe us, whisper to each other, and turn to each other and laugh as if they are discussing our appearance. This is unprofessional and unacceptable.
And this might be like a stupid question, and tell me if it is, but lawyers are so deliberate, and I don't know if I have my conspiracy hat on, but was this a tactic by them, those lawyers?
So I've been asked that a lot based on like the there were 2 juries dismissed, right? That's very unusual. I think there's a lot of people that would have observed proceedings that would feel that the outcome of the case might have been different had there been a jury. So when they're kind of putting those things together, I think it's natural for people to ask that question. If I'm like really thinking about it, I think, to try to strategically get a jury dismissed would be both diabolical, unethical, and would require like the level of orchestration that I'm not sure I see. So do I think that was a tactic to get the juries dismissed? No. Do I think, though, that, it was advantageous potentially to the defense that there were 2 juries dismissed? Yes. And I will tell you that one thing that I felt uncomfortable with during the trial was, maybe this is like sort of Pollyanna-ish of me, but like I really liked the idea of people from all walks of life that are randomly selected, take this like pretty solemn oath, and they're empowered with this like very significant responsibility to judge their peers. And, for as much as, we've probably all been selected for jury duty and maybe like bitch and complain about like it impacting your day. But I do think people take that responsibility and privilege like very seriously. And, the judge gives these instructions about, we are empowering you and we are entrusting you with this very significant responsibility as triers of fact, as independent triers of fact. And, bestowing that responsibility is a great privilege, but responsibility, and these are the things that we want you to be aware of and to gird yourself against in terms of, outside influence. And, you don't want them to look up anything about the case and any improper conduct and stuff. And if you recognize improper conduct, we want you to be able to, let people know if that happens. And so the fact that like 2 different juries did escalate concerns about that, I didn't like that. It probably was the right legal decision to say this jury is maybe not capable of giving the accused a fair trial because it's centered around allegations of impropriety concerning the defense. And I think, the accused deserve the right to a fair trial, just the same as, the Crown and complainant. But I felt like the way some of the concerns of the jurors were dismissed in sort of, not even interrogated with much rigor was somewhat offensive. Like it felt like we're trusting you with all this responsibility and this is why we think that you're capable. And then it's like, as soon as they raise this complaint, it's like I felt like it was sort of dismissed as like, you're not super sophisticated or understand the, nuances of the legal system. And, clearly we're not putting much stock in this.
What was the reaction? Like you're sitting there and you're watching this happen, this unfold. What was the reaction in the court? What was your instant reaction when that note was read aloud?
I wasn't there the day that it was read aloud. Mm-hmm. My dad was in the hospital, I think. And so I had heard about it from Dan. And then I was there the next morning when they declared the mistrial. But my understanding of that day is there was like shock when it happened. As there was like when the first complaint was filed. So like, yeah, I mean, it was a bit of like kind of pandemonium. And I think everyone, regardless of why you were there, whether it's family members, whether it was people on either legal team, whether it was media members. I mean, that's very bizarre to see two juries make complaints of that nature and allegations of that nature, but also to see two juries dismissed.
I had such a hard time, again, as a layperson. We were talking about common sense versus, the law, and they're not necessarily the same thing. But like, you hand a note to the judge saying, I don't like the defense because I think they're making fun of me. And I'm sitting there going, what did you think was going to happen? And then surely you would think a tenured defense attorney would know not to talk to a juror when out in the public. Why on earth would you do that? Every step of the way with this story made me feel like I knew less than I did before.
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't think you're the only one there. And I mean, there were so many times throughout this case that we'd all be like looking around and being like, this is really bizarre. And, I mean, those allegations were never, tested. Like I said, they weren't, the court had to determine whether that jury could continue and be impartial. And that was the main question to be answered. So I understand not getting into sort of ancillary concerns there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think the jurors were probably following instructions about, what they were supposed to do if something they felt like improper happened without necessarily thinking of the implications. And, the Crown in both cases did fight pretty hard to try to preserve a jury, and especially after the second allegation, because you have to remember at that point, EM, the woman at the center of this trial, the complainant, she had been on the stand for 9 days. And so, to not, if you want to preserve a jury trial, you either have to preserve that jury or you have to agree to impanel another one, and then she has to go through that process again.
Yeah, and so that's why you move forward with just the judge, right? Because just going through that.
But they didn't want to. I mean, it was clear that they did not want to do that, and they said, we presented this case for a jury, right? And so I would imagine that's we're presenting this to lay people that aren't going to be steeped in case law.
Right. And that makes a ton of sense in terms of, what the jury did there, I think was the right thing for them to do, because you're saying, listen, I'm developing a bias here, right? Yeah. And that is the responsible thing to do. And that's the hard. This is, Katie, you've referenced it a couple times. This is what's so hard about this: is
a bias that didn't fall out of the sky.
Yeah, 100%. But it's still there.
Yes.
But what's amazing, and I think a lot of people just assume a lot of stuff that you can do a lot of stuff legally that you can't do. Shocking. Most of us are not lawyers, right? So it's these processes and that sort of thing. Katie, you'd be a heck of a lot more familiar with it than we would be, because you've covered multiple cases. But, when you're presented with how a court works versus how public opinion works, they're so vastly different. And that's usually for good reason. You have to go through these particular processes in order to try to find, and the bar is extraordinarily high. And this is the key part of this too. Civil case, where Hockey Canada didn't even go to civil case, they just paid off EM, and the bar for that is different than a criminal trial, right? The criminal trial is beyond reasonable doubt, right? Civil trial is different. So, Katie, when you watch EM go on the stand for 9 days, and I don't want to talk to you as a reporter, I want to talk to you as a human being. What did you feel? I know what was said. I've read all the details. How do you go into the courtroom? I think it starts at 10, ends at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. You got a break in between. Every day, what are you walking back or driving back to your hotel room thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's heavy to watch that happen in real time. Because, I think one of the really interesting things about this case is for so long and for good reason, this woman has been identified by initials only, right? And there's many reasons for that. But, when she testified in court, like that's the first time many of us have ever seen her. And so, you're listening in a more sort of active way because you're interpreting not just what she's saying, but how she's saying it, her emotions, her nonverbal cues, how she reacts to questions, all of that. And so it's a pretty heavy experience, I think, just covering a case of that nature to begin with, whether she's on the stand or not. But I think those 9 days were very emotionally charged, not just with her, but you remember that she kind of had to go through the gauntlet of 5 different defense teams, and they all approached their cross-examination with different styles and strategies, and it evoked different responses from her, and so it was heavy. It was a lot. And one of the fascinating things for me watching it is her kind of comportment on the stand really changed. Like there was a real kind of arc and trajectory to how she was on day one in both chief or direct testimony to, kind of her first couple days of cross-examination to the end. And, she started as very polite, very compliant, very sort of collegial, really trying to, she apologized profusely if she couldn't get to, the page of a document quick enough, say sorry a bunch of times. And, then the different defense teams, I think, really went at her pretty hard, which I think a lot of people expected. Perhaps not to that degree, but and you saw her become agitated, more combative, flustered, emotional. But then she kind of, went back to being, what she said is sticking up for herself and a bit more willing to push back on suggestions that were put forth or questioning and cross-examination styles that clearly rubbed her the wrong way. And so by the end, I think she was pretty sort of more defiant and self-assured. So it was almost like a story.
Range.
Yeah, it was a story within a trial, really. You saw a real arc of emotions, and you saw certainly a real arc of different lawyering tactics and styles.
One of the obviously key elements to this case is consent. And this is, as a society, something we've been examining a lot over the last 10 years. And you saw that really with the emergence of the Me Too movement, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, and all the way on down, right? And the reality of consent, as I understand it, is that it can be given and then taken. It can be given and then mid-moment taken at any moment. And one of the Crown's main arguments is that consent either could not be given or was withdrawn. And in the closing, and I don't want to jump too far into what the judge said afterwards because I want to get to that. I think that's its own thing. That was not proven. That the onus of proof, I believe, is what they used, was not reached, and that consent, at least in the court's opinion, was given. And I think I want to drill down a little bit, Katie, on consent from the legal perspective, as you understand it after this case. Because they talked about it a lot. What is it actually in a legal sense?
Yeah, so Canada has relatively stringent consent laws, and they're sort of predicated under the concept that consent is dynamic, right? It has to happen contemporaneously, it cannot be given retroactively. I mean it can be given at the outset and then rescinded, and that it has to be ongoing and affirmative, corresponding with each sexual act. And so, consent, like I was actually kind of surprised by how stringent the law was in that respect, in terms of, the bar that you have to clear to obtain consent. And so that was like a huge, crux to both cases. The Crown in their opening, said that this is a case that's all going to come down to consent. And we are going to describe consent and consent law, and that will be part of the judge's instructions to the jury before deliberations. But also there was almost this preemptive, like, we need you to dispel sort of like what you might think consent looks like, or what sexual assault looks like, or how someone that was a victim of sexual assault might behave like. And we're going to take you through why we believe, that, her consent was not present during the act. And that was really interesting. I think sort of fundamental to the Crown's case was, an argument that, in certain cases, it wasn't ongoing and affirmative to each sexual act, that, she has never contested that she consented to having that first initial sexual encounter with Michael McLeod, but that she was not, anticipating other players arriving, that she was, to some degree incapacitated to provide consent by her level of intoxication, and that also, like, consent, was not able to be provided because of the fear that she felt, like that she was under duress because of the situation she was in, where she felt fearful.
Right.
But the judge, we can get into the ruling later, but the judge did not agree with those elements of the Crown's argument.
There were two, I don't know if these are what the technical term for them, but the judge was like, this isn't a thing. This doesn't count in the middle. One of them was, there's a group chat of the players essentially trying to get their story straight. And then in the article that you and Dan wrote, it's Kiviranta rejected the Crown's premise that the players were attempting to get their story straight, which you're reading an exchange of half a dozen, whatever it is, young men trying to get their story straight. And then the judge goes, you didn't read that. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. The other one that blew my mind the most, and this is how I knew, like, this trial is going to be impossible for everyone to understand thoroughly, because it just took place over such a long period of time and there was so much to take in. The Brett Howden stuff melted my face.
Like the concept of a hostile witness, that sort of thing.
So here from the article, and I'll get you to just continue after that. Howden, who vividly described EM being slapped on the buttocks so hard it looked like it hurt so bad, and I'm putting air quotes because you're quoting him, in a text to Taylor Radish a week after the incident, had no memory of it while on the stand. Did he remember where in the room it happened? No, I don't. I don't remember seeing it. Does he remember if she was clothed or unclothed? No, I don't. Does he remember what she was doing in the moment she was spanked? No, I don't. Did he remember how I felt or how he felt when it happened? I don't remember how I felt. I don't have memory of that. Howden's recollection was so poor that Cunningham accused him of feigning memory loss to protect his former teammates. The defense jumped in, bringing up the multiple head injuries Howden has suffered in his hockey career as a plausible reason why he wouldn't be able to even recall the text message he sent describing Dubé slapping EM's buttocks. And then that text of him telling a friend, here is what I saw, was ruled to be inadmissible.
And also, just to add to that, before Katie, you jump in on this, his appearance in court, in terms of what he wore.
He showed up in a hoodie on video call.
Yeah.
So and they kind of talked about, it was almost like, and I don't know if this is a proper way to say this, but they were like, this guy's just too dumb. Like, it's how they frame
that. Is paraphrasing, but
I think they called him useless or something like that. It was something relatively, something I was surprised by how pejorative it was. But yeah, I think the Megan Savard, I remember she did mention like what he wore, and that his, testimony was not reliable for a variety of reasons. And I think they did call him useless or something.
Savard, I don't know what article I'm quoting here. I want to say this is Rick Wested's reporting. I'm not sure. Savard also described Howden as unsophisticated, that he didn't come dressed for court. He was wearing a hoodie, and that he was inarticulate, a poor communicator, and careless with words. Savard said if feigning memory was deliberate, you would expect a general trend towards being helpful. I would say, if anything, we may all say at the end of the day, this witness is generally useless, but certainly not helpful to the defense, Savard said.
Right. The Brett Howden testimony was a real wild, like, sort of roller coaster of events. And remember, he was a Crown witness.
Yes.
Right.
And so
The prosecution, basically. Yeah. For Americans listening.
Yes, that's helpful. Yeah, thank you very much. And so it did seem to take them by surprise, like his inability to remember certain things. Because you're right, and we wrote about this, they essentially like treated him as, I don't want to say a hostile witness because that has like legal implications, and I don't think they went quite that far. But they clearly like had to start questioning him less as in a way that you would your own case's witness, but in a more adversarial way, based on what he could and could not remember. And, he got very emotional on the stand. He cried one day. He got choked up, I think, another day. He wore a hoodie.
They asked him about his dad or something, and that.
Yeah, they asked him about his kid, and that really evoked a powerful, like, visceral reaction from him. And it was largely like based around, what do you remember about like the fear that you felt when Hockey Canada first found out? And so that was, it was weird. And, that was seen as a pretty critical piece of like sort of contemporaneous evidence of him, referencing the slap and it being, a hard slap. And, Brett Howden, I believe, might have been the one who also said at one point that he had heard weeping
I believe
from
right,
EM.
Yeah.
And so, for that text message to not be, allowed in, I think was a pretty significant blow for the Crown's case.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned
there was also like a bunch of, in the pretrial motions, there was, there was a significant ruling in the pretrial process about certain evidence that would not be admitted in based on like the Hockey Canada investigation and the information that unearthed and elicited from the players, because that was like seen as being obtained, I don't want to say if under duress, but coerced, because they were basically saying, if you don't cooperate in this investigation, like we have the ability to not allow you to compete or to like name and shame you for your lack of participation.
Right. Which again, you can understand in a different context for sure why that would not be.
Sure.
I can understand that. Jesse, go ahead.
You mentioned like the fear that Howden had after like the allegations come out. And in your article, you bring up that he wrote, if anything, we should put an allegation against her in one of the text messages. And it speaks to how he was feeling at the time in his direct text messages. And like a jury who's told to dismiss that, they can't unhear something like that, but a judge is able to compartmentalize that evidence as opposed to what they're ruling on just a law basis. And I think it comes full circle to the fact that a jury would interpret those words differently, even though they're not supposed to, as opposed to a judge who's doing it by the book. And it just leads more towards the defense's argument in that respect.
Yeah, and the judge, referenced that group chat in her decision that, the Crown had, posited that that was evidence of these players trying to coordinate their stories and strategize about what to tell investigators and to collude, essentially. And the defense said these are like scared young, I think one defense attorney used the word like scared young boys.
They got upset about the use of calling them men.
Right. Yeah. And that, they were panicking and they were scared about like getting in trouble with Hockey Canada and potentially having their livelihood impacted. And this is just like evidence of their panic. And the judge found that to be the more convincing argument. But, you bring up an interesting point, I think, about the jury. One of the things so this is another difference between Canadian and US courts is like, it is, to my understanding, against the law for a juror to discuss at least certain elements of the case with anyone.
Yes, including family.
And right. And so, but in the US, once a case is over, like a juror is allowed to talk. And so I've always it'd be so fascinating to hear from jurors, like how they process this evidence and like what was compelling to them, what was not. And one of the things that I'd be most curious about from this case was, there's 5 very high profile, very experienced, seasoned criminal defense lawyers, right? And she was on the stand for 9 days. And that is a very, very long time. Like, I was talking to a veteran sex crimes prosecutor about this the other day, and she was like, I've never seen that. And not just the length, but the nature of the questioning was very like no holds barred. And there, was, I think, some questioning styles and tactics that, I'd be very curious to know how those tactics and styles played with the jury.
Yeah. And I think that sort of leads us into the judge's remarks at the end here, and have read multiple think piece articles both ways, because I think it's important. There are people that are celebrating this, and we'll talk about there's a lot of people with 2020 hindsight claiming right now, well, I always knew the Crown should have never brought this, and it was clear from the investigation in 2017 or whatever it was that 2018. Yeah. So it was clear from that investigation that they didn't have the evidence to move forward on this anyway. But the judge was particularly harsh on a few counts when she read her remarks afterwards. And, I think it shocked people because the verdict was going to be what the verdict was. Okay. But what really was the adjunct thing that people went, wow, was her talking about EM's credibility, Katie. And also the Crown's inability to put what she called like a reasonable argument in front of them that was compelling enough. And I'm curious about your reaction to those remarks, not on a human level, but on a journalist level, because you were at the proceedings. Were you surprised that she went that hard at the Crown for those arguments and made such aggressive, at least in my mind, aggressive statements about?
It was harsh.
They didn't have proof here. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. I was genuinely shocked.
Yes, I was surprised. I don't think anyone that was covering the case on a daily basis was necessarily surprised about the outcome of the case. Especially the judge ruled on almost all matters of substance for the defense. And so I don't think that was a particularly shocking outcome. And you combine that with the fact that convictions in sexual assault cases are notoriously difficult to obtain. And there is a high standard onus burden of proof, as it should be. These are very serious allegations. But I was absolutely surprised by the judge's tenor and the content of her thorough and comprehensive repudiation of both, EM as a complainant, and the prosecution's case. I was very surprised by that. You can acquit, and you can acquit on these charges, and say, I don't believe that the Crown met its burden of beyond a reasonable doubt on this charge and this charge, and based on this case law and this case law. And, I had issues with credibility and reliability with the complainant on certain elements, et cetera. But this was pretty scathing across the board. There were so many different instances in which the judge cited pretty specific things that seemed like almost like a very stern rebuke.
Do you think the judge was aware? I'm sure the judge was aware of where this case will stand in Canadian history. Like, it felt like the remarks were not just for this case, but as almost a precedence for other cases. And I know so much of the law is based on what's happened before. Well, let's look at the case law. Let's see what's happened before. Here's how juries usually react. Here's how judges usually react. Here's how these things normally go. Do you think that there was, and I don't mean this to diminish, but I have no other term for it. Is this more of like this is like a statement or a PR piece of like, these are the expectations from the Canadian system, and if you don't meet them, there will not be a successful conviction here?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that would be I think someone with more, legal expertise would have a better answer for that. Because my guess is there's people with the legal expertise can probably evaluate the case better on its legal merits. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about precedent in case law, I imagine that for the Crown, that will be something when you talk about this sort of setting a standard, or not necessarily a precedent, but sending a message. I imagine that will be something that the Crown will consider when evaluating whether to appeal. My understanding is when a judge offers a decision that's thoroughly rooted, as Caracia did, in her lack of belief in the complainant's credibility and reliability. I think that's harder to appeal, from my understanding, because you're not necessarily making the argument that the judge is erring in case law. But I do think, that will be something that the Crown considers, because I think the law is a dynamic thing, and it's sort of always evolving to meet the moment of our general understanding of, certain crimes and, trauma and stuff like that. And so there have been some really interesting cases recently where that sort of those concepts and ideas have sort of, been shifted and evolved over time in case law. And so I'll be very fascinated to see what the implications of this decision will be as it relates to that.
So there are a lot of people claiming, I knew this was never going to, I just knew. And, unless you're a lawyer or you work in the law, I tend not to believe that. I can imagine that there would be lawyers watching this going, yeah, I think they might have an uphill battle here or whatever, right? Because they've gone through this. They have that ability.
I spoke to some criminal lawyers throughout, and they said that, but everyone else was talking out of their ass. Yeah.
Right. So now there's, a whole bunch of pundits who are, seizing on this and going, again, why did they even bring the case? Katie, I have my opinions on this, but I'm curious to hear, because you have a background and you mentioned you did the Larry Nassar case. Is there a value to bringing a case like this, even if it's going to be an uphill battle to actually prosecute? And the reason I say that is sometimes it creates notoriety and change in systems perhaps that didn't exist before. So, for instance, we now know that Hockey Canada puts their kids, and these are kids, puts them through consent training and teaches them some of these things now. And I don't know how in depth that is, but there is at least an effort from that perspective. You know,
Well, we learned about the fund. Like
we learned about the fund. We didn't know about the
without
fund.
everything happening here. Like we probably don't learn about the fund that they had, and
Right.
Then we had the changes at Hockey Canada and all that.
Do you think, and obviously, you know, EM is a major part of this. So I'm talking outside of EM's role and involvement. Do you think that there is some, I guess for a lot of people, it's not that anybody wants to see, that nobody wants to see this happen. I guess my point and my question, and that I'm struggling to get to here is there something that people can take away from this where they go, because I think a lot of people feel like the bad guys are winning across the board right now. And I don't want to cast any side in this, but it is a tough time for news. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, you know, are we seeing some changes regardless of the outcome of this case because of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it's important to like draw some distinctions here, which is, you know, one thing that Caricia said in her ruling is it is not the court's job to rule on morality or propriety of conduct, right? Her job is to make a legal ruling, and that's what she did. And so they were acquitted of criminal wrongdoing. But, you know, she assessed the case on its merits and on case law and on the evidence and testimony and the evidence that was admissible, not the stuff that was outside of it. Like you said, like judges are, you know, sort of like the supreme triers of fact, and they are able to compartmentalize about what is admissible, what is not. But there, you know, that is not, and we wrote about this, like that will not be the only thing that is considered, I think, about this case when we look at it in its totality, right? Like we will, and you even look at it in the context of like the NHL landscape. Like there will be some teams that purely look at this from they were acquitted criminally, and like this is how the court of law looks at it, right? I think there will be some other teams that look at it more holistically of, you know, there is a moral and propriety component to this that like we want to consider, like a judgment. And so, you know, I don't think that the verdict is like sort of the end all be all of like the criminal case. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think we can and we should draw the distinction that they have been acquitted of criminal wrongdoing. But I also think it's okay to look at this in a broader sense of, you know, this case was a bit of a touchstone for people, you know, in the many years as it unfolded, and it revealed all of these sort of things that are central to hockey culture and youth sports culture and, you know, misogyny and entitlement. And, you know, I think it leaves us with a verdict, I mean, or a decision as it, you know, it is in this case, but also a lot of questions about like, how do we grapple with what we know about like what happened in that room? And, you know, how it got to that place and how it was handled and how the institutions of power responded to allegations. And, you know, I think there will also be questions about how the judicial and legal system is equipped to deal with allegations of this nature. You know, one of the really more interesting recent like cases, there was the Hogard case that was a few
Jacob
years
Hogard
back.
from Headley.
Yep.
Yep.
And so, and I believe Megan Savard Carter-Hart's lawyer was involved in that case as well. But one of like, you know, for example, one of the rulings that came out of that case that was, you know, appealed and, you know, the conviction was upheld, but there were some, you know, sort of other things that came from that was the use of expert witnesses on trauma and the neurobiology of trauma. And, I think that in that case, like the defense had argued that like the use of an expert witness to explain the neurobiology of trauma was unnecessary and could have like, influenced the jurors to in a inappropriate way. And the ruling of the court was basically that, I think that that's not always necessary, and that it can be, the idea of like myths and stereotypes that pervade legal systems about sexual assault specifically can be addressed in a judge's like instructions to the juries and, stuff like that. And so, I think this question, we got an answer. Mm-hmm. Right. But we're also left with a lot of questions. And I think grappling with those questions is like a healthy and important thing for all of us that are, a stakeholder in a sport, or people that enjoy the sport, play the sport, write about the sport. And I don't think that the decision that we had, last week is the end of that discussion.
The National Hockey League released a statement on July 25th, so this is 4 days ago as of this recording, and they said, the allegations made in this case, even if not determined to be criminal, were very disturbing, and the behavior at issue was unacceptable. We will be reviewing and considering the judge's findings. While we conduct that analysis and determine next steps, the players charged in this case are ineligible to play in the league. And, I think we all understand, and then the NHLPA said, well, actually, that by your own standards, that's not true. So there will be some back and forth, and we expect that some of these players will be under contract even as early as the start of the season. But, the key of it is, and I think you kind of nailed it, Katie, is that there's the legal, and then there's the, hey, that still was pretty shitty.
Yeah, the NHL has a code of conduct policy where you can do something that's not illegal, but just does not uphold the values of the NHL, and they can choose to not have you on the league. It's a private entity, and they have their own rules. It's not just, hey, this wasn't illegal, that means you're free to play hockey.
Right.
They have their own rules around that, just for anybody who's confused as to why.
Yeah.
Just because they weren't found guilty doesn't mean they can just play hockey again.
Well, I think people are confused because it's incredibly vague.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, but I think...
So I think that's intentional, by the way.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So,
of course.
I mean, like, but I will say this. So, there has been a lot of discussion, and I believe I've written about it in the past too, about like how the NHL does not have a domestic violence and sexual abuse policy that is codified. And like, I do think that is an important step for like, the league to take and the NHLPA to support. But I actually think that like, I have always interpreted that to like, I think Gary Bettman wants a wide berth and a lot of latitude to make these decisions. And I think having, I think you're seeing him exercise it, or at least attempt to right now. And I think, I would point out that the NHL has has conducted, and I'm not sure if it is complete or considered complete at this point, because certainly they would have to assess more stuff that came out at the trial. But like, let's not forget that the NHL also conducted its own investigation. And so it can consider that as part of its analysis of whether these players can or should be eligible. And, the one other thing that I will say is like, as we talk about the kind of two things that teams might be weighing, it's like the legal component, right? They were acquitted of criminal wrongdoing. There's the moral component of, there's a lot about what happened in that room that is not in dispute. Like this main fundamental thing is whether there was consent to what happened, right? But I do think there's like a third bucket that teams are going to be considering, and this is going to make me sound cynical, but like I think the third bucket is less qualitative about like whether they agree with what happened, and more sort of like pragmatically, what will be the fallout if they sign these players, assuming that they're eligible, right? Like what they will have to deal with in terms of blowback if these players are eligible and they do choose to sign them. And I think that's cynically a thing that will probably be very important or a priority that a lot of teams will consider.
Yeah, and the mentioning the vagueness of the NHL and the CBA and how everything's written, that's something we talk about constantly when just hockey things
like
come
video
up.
reviews.
The reason they don't have, hey, if you cross-check someone on the head, it's a 4-game suspension or anything like that, is because they want to rule on a case-by-case basis and not be held down by anything that's written down. So when things like this come up, Gary can make his decisions in any which way he wants because nothing's written down or held to any sort of standard. So it's whenever something pops up, they can make a decision on what they want to do, and they come up with $1 million suspensions for the Blackhawks or 50-game suspensions for gambling, and just all kind of on a whim as we go along with the NHL.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to get
one
that in this
interesting-
case too.
Yeah, and one thing that I'll be curious to see is like if the NHLPA and the NHL like really are at loggerheads of this issue, like if they take him to court, like if there's any sort of like litigation that follows this, like I will be curious to know if the fruits of the NHL investigation is going to become public as like part of the league's defense about saying you're not eligible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's
We don't know. I mean, we do not know much about that investigation.
And we don't know, and that will probably remain that way. We also don't know, like this sort of quote unquote chummy relationship that the PA and the NHL head office now currently have with Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman. This is one of those things where to understand the conversations and the reasoning of whatever they come to, like I'm sure they're from a business perspective and a cynical perspective, quite thrilled that this is happening in the summertime. And not in the middle of a season or in the middle of the playoffs when the trial was happening.
Yep.
I would also say that it will be fascinating to see how this plays out because the PA's job is to advocate for the players. And normally, as a normal citizen, you are like pro PA. But in this particular instance, I think there are going to be a lot of people, and I think the NHL will, I think the PA knows this. I think the NHL knows this. That if that fight, if we call it that, or negotiation spills out into the public domain, it could have quite big ramifications just from a PR perspective, right? And that is the main thing now that we're looking at. And I think CJ and Michael Russo put an article out about what happens next from the league level. But anything on that would be at this point purely speculative. But Katie, I think you make a really point is like that is the next big piece to fall here. And my bet here is that we get a statement at some point about reinstatement. We get no reasons why, and they probably refuse to answer questions on it. Like we will not know how they came to that conclusion. And Katie, I mean, you've had dealings with many pro sports leagues. That tends to be how they handle sticky situations. Say less so that nobody can really hold you to account for it. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have wide latitude to make decisions, like you don't probably have to be as transparent. I mean, it also depends on sort of the teeth of the CBA and whether the union has a mechanism to, make a ruling and it's the fruits of that ruling like transparent. But I think you are smart to point out that, this does feel like sort of and this is kind of like a side tangent, but this does feel like a kind of prolonged stretch of the most sort of like the least enmity in a NHLPA relationship that I've seen since I've covered the sport, and I've covered, I've done labor issues with NHL and NHLPA, and this has been the most. I don't want to call it labor peace. I don't think there's ever quite labor peace, but I do think that there's
labor
not
compromise, maybe.
Yeah, well, there's just not the level of enmity between the NHL and NHLPA that we've seen historically. So I'm fascinated to see how this plays out from that perspective.
Right.
How hard they push, because like I said, I think there's elements of the NHL investigation that we should assume right now will never see the light of day. But I think that the surest way that they would see the light of day is if the PA comes at them very forcefully.
One of the things I do want to say, Katie, as we wrap this up, unless you guys have other questions.
Yeah, because there's the NHL side of stuff, but there's also the Hockey Canada side of this whole issue. Are we gonna regroup on that story from their perspective and the payout they made to EM, or anything we gotta regroup on just how they're running stuff? And now that we have a verdict on this, are we going back to the Hockey
A lot of people are just like, well, they're gonna sue. Right, and we don't know that that's true.
Which I wouldn't be surprised by, quite honestly, because I do think it's, again, I'm not a legal scholar or expert here. I do think it's very unusual to settle a case without notifying the accused of allegations against them, one
that
of the sort of
happened.
One of the bedrocks of charter rights in Canada and, the Constitution in the US and the legal systems of respective countries is you have to know what you're accused of and be given the opportunity to defend yourself. And so I would not be surprised at all if we see litigation against Hockey Canada that addresses that very question.
So I asked about that with some people, and my understanding of it, and again, I'm not a legal scholar either, so the law is, if not flexible in terms of what you can go after people for. My understanding of it is that because they're a private organization, they're allowed to, or not private, they're public-private, but they're allowed to do that without telling the players because of some sort of this is, you actually have no say in this, right? Because you don't own, they don't own Hockey Canada. They're not members of Hockey Canada. So Hockey Canada can act on its own without retribution from those players. Now, I don't know how well that holds up, but that's what I have been told. And so that part of it is very, very interesting. I'm curious, do you think we see a statement from Hockey Canada on this?
No, because I think that they're wary of doing so because they probably are aware of the specter of litigation. I mean,
Right.
you could totally be right about, again, I'm not a legal expert, so I don't know, I don't have a firm enough legal grounding to know whether that they would have, a strong case for civil litigation about this as it relates to the settlement. But I imagine, institutions always act in sort of a way that is going to, protect their reputation and limit their exposure to legal liability. And so,
Especially publicly.
So I don't think I see necessarily them making a preemptive statement on that until there's more clarity about whether there could be, litigation that they're going to have to deal with.
Got it. Okay. So I just want to say this, unless you guys have anything else to add. The coverage that you and Sean Gentili and Haley Salvian and Dan Robson and all of your editors behind the scenes have done, and we'll shout out friend of the show Rick Westhead as well from TSN, the reporters who went in there. I have to thank you for it, not because we need to blow smoke, but because understanding these stories, these are the big stories of our time, right? And the amount of effort and work, and the fact that, let's be honest here, from a business perspective, a lot of the times this stuff doesn't drive subscriptions, right? It's not, it's not your hot trade list, nothing against those. The amount of thankless hours that goes into this, Katie, we just wanted to say a thank you to your team for covering it the way that you did. A thank you to you for joining our show in the middle of summer when you didn't have to, for as long as you have.
Yeah.
While jet lagged,
yeah. We as we always do, we very, very much appreciate all the work that went into this, and please thank your team on our behalf, because it was a heck of a job covering it, and I would encourage everybody to read at very least this article from Dan Robson and Katie Strang. The Hockey Canada trial could have been a reckoning. It was something else, and at the top you can see the whole thing. So there's a whole slider bar that you can go and check everything out so that you can educate yourself as much as you want to on this. Katie, your journalism is phenomenal, and we genuinely appreciate it.
Yeah, it's worth the $7.99 or whatever the Athletics charging these days.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Well, I appreciate that plug from you guys, and thank you all as well. I mean, I will say, these are, difficult, complicated, time-consuming, and sensitive stories. And I think like too frequently, a lot of places just like don't want to roll up their sleeves and like deal with them. And so I think having these conversations are both necessary, really healthy, and important. And I always appreciate how thoughtfully you guys approach these issues, and let us talk about our work, which we really appreciate.
Well, we will have to. It's been, I think, 2 or 3 years at least since you've been on the show, so we can't let it be 2 or 3 years again next time. But thank you for everything. I know your kids are upstairs waiting for their snacks, so please get back to them.
Knowing the stories that you cover, I hope you never have to come on the show ever again.
Yeah.
I know. I think we know the answer to that.
In my eyes, I feel like if you never came on the show again, it'd be great.
Life would be good.
Yeah,
life would be good. But yeah, Katie, I'm sure we will see you again.
Yeah.
Until then, so much respect from us about all the work that you guys do.
Thank you very much. You guys are great.
It's almost vacation season here on the SDP, and you're already in it. You're in vacation season, and you might be leaving the country, and you might be going somewhere, and your cell phone company's like, "Yeah, give me some of that roaming money."
No.
Yeah, I want to steal some more of your cash because I'm a cell phone company and I operate a virtual monopoly. Not anymore, cell phone company. We have Saley. We can buy roaming plans, and we don't have to include you. Goodbye. There is 150 countries, 8 regions around the world. Maddie's used it on vacation. Maddie, did your brother use it?
Yeah, my brother used it. Now I'm about to use it in the UK next month. So
she's going to the
shout out.
Team Saley.
Thanks for that discount.
Yeah, there you go. So here's the deal. We want to give you a discount, but I just also want to remind you too. One of the things I know Tim, specifically Tim Haraney from Nailing the Apex, runs into is, hey, I'm in certain area of the world, and I don't necessarily trust the hotel Wi-Fi, which is publicly available and has a gigantic terms of service, and yes, they're tracking me, or the local cafe, or even sometimes the local carrier, right? You just don't know. And the great thing about Saley is that it's backed by Nord Security, which means that you've got security behind it.
Yeah, I don't trust that Italian government.
Yeah.
Based on what I know from The Sopranos.
So stealing your data, you know?
Oh, no.
I'm kidding. I'm sure Italian Wi-Fi is great.
All right.
Anyway,
Dangle.
Saley.com/dangle. That's it. It's Saley.com/dangle. Plus up to 5% cashbacks on Saley credits. Get your exclusive discount with Saley eSIMs, Saley.com/dangle, or you just download the app. That's easy too.
The Presser. SDP. The Steve Dangle Press Conference.
All right. Thanks again to Katie. We're on to plugging our own stuff because Cole Hayes writes, can we get a What's Up in Liberty Village segment on Thursday? But it's Alberta Facebook on Trudeau and Katy Perry. And people,
wow. This might be the best idea we've ever had sent our way. No hyperbole.
Cole needs
what are you talking about?
What?
We're not doing this.
Oh, we're not?
No.
Why?
Hey, we have SDP VIP for a reason. This isn't a question we're answering.
Oh, no, I know that.
No, you clearly don't. You didn't let me talk. I was queuing up something. I couldn't even get through a sentence of anything. Stomped all over it.
I said it was good.
So, Trudeau and Katy Perry, like that regular pop culture stuff we used to do all the time on the regular show, we don't do that anymore because we have a whole other episode every week about that stuff. We talked about Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry going on a date on this week's SDP VIP, which drops at Wednesday night, so at 12 a.m. on Wednesday, and you can listen to it there.
Cole's idea was better than what we did. So
yeah.
Just temper your expectations.
I did give him credit for that.
Yeah, but like it was not going to happen.
You know what?
You have a place for that.
The thing is with Facebook now, too, it used to be that you knew everybody was real because AI didn't exist. Now I'm like, these fuckers are not even, these are just troll farms.
My name is Carol.
None of this shit's real. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Jesse. What else we got? I'm excited for that VIP.
No. Just What's Up in Livage. Let's get into it, Steve. Heard it. Hear it up. Pull up What's Up in Livage on your phone.
I would love to.
Awesome. All right. Gianna writes, what is the Mount Rushmore of players to win the cup after leaving the Leafs?
Well, Phil.
Yeah, it's got to be Phil.
Yeah,
Frank-
4 because that's Mount Rushmore.
Undisputedly Lanny McDonald.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think Phil has to be on there. Lanny McDonald has to be on there. Sundin, unfortunately, is not. Sittler, unfortunately, is not.
So you got 2?
Yeah, those are 2. Mahat
Mahovlich won with the
Did
Canadiens.
Mahovlich start with the Leafs though? I can't remember.
Oh yeah. He won 4 cups with the Leafs in the 60s, and then he went to the Wings and then won 2 cups with the Canadiens in
So
the early
that
70s.
doesn't count. Has to be somebody who didn't win here.
I think
Oh, he
you
did?
have
Oh.
to.
Yeah,
You
no,
have to have gone. You have to have.
yeah.
I'm going to say started with the Leafs.
Yes.
And obviously not won a cup and then gone somewhere. and won their
Exactly.
first
That's the
cup. So-
criteria here. Is you sucked with the Leafs because they never win anything, and then you leave and you win.
What about Nas?
Kessel? Oh,
Nas might be on the Mount Rushmore.
He might be there.
3.
Bozak did with St. Louis, but I don't know if
he
it's
doesn't.
like
He doesn't make it.
well,
Yeah.
Bozak's in a category of like him, Hal Gill.
did Kubina win afterwards? I don't even know.
No, Kabina won before
Right.
with Tampa, like the 04 Tampa when they wore black, which
Luke
they should
Shen.
still be doing.
That's a long time though.
Yeah.
That's a
I know, he doesn't make
long
Mount
time.
Rushmore. I'm just throwing it out
Yeah,
there.
no, he did
Oh,
do that.
Larry Murphy?
Is that? I don't know enough.
I don't know. Did he win before?
So Larry Murphy's one of the greatest offensive defensemen of all time. No, I don't know if he won, but he won with Pittsburgh before. But then he signs in Toronto.
Oh,
It's
well,
a
then
free
he doesn't
agent
count.
signing, and then Toronto fans ran him out of fucking town.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't great at defense, but he was amazing. Like you look up his stats are incredible.
He had
And then-
1,216 points in 1,615 games,
And then he immediately goes and wins 2 cups in a row with Detroit.
plus 215 playoff games. Yeah, literally Leafs cup.
Yeah.
He's got 4 cups. He had 2 before with Pittsburgh.
But so
he
you can't
doesn't
have won
count.
it beforehand.
Yeah. We're talking. You were on the Leafs for a while, and the Leafs never win, and then you leave, and then you win.
Do you know the trade Toronto to Detroit?
No,
The Larry Murphy one?
I don't know that.
Traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Detroit Red Wings for future considerations. Now I'm going to have to do extra research on that because future considerations used to be so weird in the NHL. There was a trade tree I did. It was the Lindros one.
Mm-hmm.
And through the annals of all that, there was a trade where I think it was Colorado either gave up or got future considerations. I think it was in the Theron Fleury trade where he went from Calgary to Colorado. And the future considerations ended up being a first-round pick, which ended up being Robin Regeer.
Oh,
That's not bad.
So the Leafs might have got something that just isn't represented on Hockey DB.
But he had 61 points and 12 goals and 49 assists, and he was 14th in Norris Trophy voting and was an All-Star actually that year as
I'm
well.
gonna go with they got
in 95
something.
and 96. They better
Surely
have
they
gotten
got
something. He had one hell of a season.
Wow.
And it's 82 games as a Toronto Maple Leaf.
embarrassing. It's that mid 90s team. They had such a high point in the early 90s, and that mid 90s run is
they were
not talked
butt.
about enough
were
about
butt.
how they they were butt because they did it to themselves.
Yes.
They the one thing about
They were really, really good.
Cliff
and
Fletcher
got so
had
bad.
Anderchuk and Gartner. Those guys were playing second and third line.
Anderchuk, Gilmore, Clark.
And then eventually, and then swapped for Sundin, which was a brilliant trade. But then he
Yep.
fucking trades Kenny Johnson, who turned out to be
Uh-huh.
an Islander captain. Like he overtraded, he overdid it.
The 4th overall pick that turned into Roberto Luongo
Yep, all that
in
shit.
97.
Terrible.
Dude, it's so bad.
I'm just looking at Felix.
So we have 3.
He was awesome.
I think we can put in 3. Phil Kessel,
Yes.
Nazem Kadri, and Lanny McDonald.
I think that's all fair. There's got to
We
be
need a
one
4th.
that like we're just not old enough to remember properly.
Yeah. But like if it's really old, everybody who kind of played in that era has a cup. You know, if you played in the original 6
Yeah,
era.
I don't think it's that old.
Does Scott Niedermeyer count?
No.
He was
'Cause
not
he was the
drafted by
draft
the
pick.
Leafs.
No.
All right.
And it doesn't have to be drafted. Like Kessel counts, you know.
Kessel
but-
counts.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to be drafted. Just
But had a big part of their young
had a
career.
little tenure with the Leafs where you were like important.
I got one.
Okay.
Vincent Damphousse. Vincent
How long
Damphousse
was he a
was
Leaf?
spectacular.
Yeah.
The Leaf for 5 years, 45, 48, 68, 94, and 73 points. They traded him for Grant Fuhr, and then Felix Potvin emerged, and then they traded Grant Fuhr to either Buffalo or St. Louis, I can't remember. And in 92, 93, the Leafs go all the way to the Western Conference Final. You know
West.
who won? The Vinny Damphousse Montreal Canadiens.
That's a good one.
Son of a
I'm
gun.
always,
bad.
I will forever be salty, and not enough is made. You could have had Gilmore, Damphousse down the middle,
Yeah.
all the way through the 90s.
That's really not a bad one.
Yeah, Damphousse also had 39 goals in that first season as a Canadian.
Yeah.
The year before, he had 38 with the Oilers, and then, went 38, 39, 40. So, he was a stud after he left the league.
How about this, too, Jess? Performer in the playoffs in 20 games, 11 goals, 12 assists for 23 points.
Not bad.
Hold on. A Leafs drafted center who scored in the playoffs?
I think that's 4.
Yo, this is
pretty good Mount Rushmore.
Shit. Dom Foos traded from the Maple Leafs with Peter Ing, Luke Richardson, and Scott Thornton. And future considerations. Again, I don't know what it was. And cash to the Oilers for Glenn Anderson, Craig Berube, and Grant Fuhr.
And Berube played half a season before they traded him, too.
Probably for future
Fuhr was gone in a heartbeat. It was just one of those trades you go, fuck.
Dude,
anyway.
Tough.
Yeah. This is from Damian Cray on Discord. Should the Leafs try and sign Joel Kiviranta? He had the best personal season last year. He could be perfect for the bottom 6.
So at some point, you got to stop acquiring bottom 6ers like Infinity Stones. Yeah. But
we can't have 18 guys for the bottom 6.
Yeah. But, what I'm starting to realize, because, listen, this was not exactly a star-studded free agent class, or at least not in terms of depth. But there's guys, there's the name I keep bringing up is Brett Leeson, because he's played
going to the KHL, Steve.
I know, but he played for the Ducks, and he's fucking enormous. He's 6'5".
You love Brett Leeson.
230. No, just because I'm looking, I'm like, who fits the thing? Kiviranta is, I think, clearly a useful player, clearly an NHL player, and yet he doesn't have a deal.
5'11", Steve.
I know. But there are guys.
I like him a lot.
There are guys who I think guys are going to sneak through waivers that you couldn't have possibly imagined this year. And I wonder if he's one of them. There are going to be, every year, there are dozens of NHL quality players who play in the American Hockey League. And
also,
maybe he's one.
I just want to throw that out there. Kiviranta, 7 games in the playoffs, 0 points.
Yeah, except he had a Game 7 hat trick in 2020 or 2021. I can't remember.
Probably 2019, because it's the only time he's ever scored more than 1 goal in the playoffs.
That's wrong. He had a Game 7 hat trick against the... Let me see. So Adam's showing it to me. Adam, that's 2020, you boner.
Oh, okay.
It's in 2019-20 season. In 14 games, he had 5 goals, 1 assist.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I was still right. He's only ever done it once.
You said 2019!
And you're fucking giving people shit. Well, we can't have Kalle Yarncroke. He's a passenger in the playoffs. So you would like to replace him with Joel Kiviranta?
Kiviranta has more...
Right? Who was right on
me?
Okay.
Kiviranta had as many goals in that playoff run as Yarncroke has in his entire career. In over 100 games.
Yeah, and you know what he's done since? 2 goals in 40 games.
That's still more.
You're also not getting Kiviranta to be Austin Matthews.
Are you getting him to be Kalle Yarncroke?
We're not expecting him to score 60 goals here.
You're getting him to be the new Finnish stereotype, which never really made its way into the lexicon of hockey.
Yeah.
You know how Swedes are all finesse and no contact, which, I mean, guys like Thomas Holmstrom should have buried that dead in the ground a long time ago.
Yeah.
The Finns are fucking vicious. They're pesky. They're jerks. And those are the kinds of guys who succeed on your fourth line.
And it's so funny because they're such a nation of very kind people. You get them on the ice, though, they're all bastards.
I mean, I think you could say that about a lot of hockey playing.
Yeah, but
probably.
Finns have a thing. There's like
you can't rile them about anything.
No, you can't. But they'll do stuff to you that'll make you crazy.
Yes.
The Russians are finesse. Okay, I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Yeah.
Like Kucherov and Malkin and those guys are they're like, oh my god, I've never seen a player skate like that, handle a puck like that, chop a guy's head off like that.
They're mad.
It's crazy.
They're fine until they cross the road carrying 4 laptops and you nudge them with your car.
Stop it.
And they go, look at this, you nudged my 4 laptops.
People don't know that story.
Well, you should look it up. Insurance scams are some of my favorite YouTube videos.
Right here in the GTA, there's a new registered charity called Progressive Life Center in Ajax that's changing lives for teens and adults with autism and developmental disabilities. Think of it as a training facility, but also instead of developing athletic skills. They're developing life skills, work skills, and building confidence. They got a customized facility with everything from teaching kitchen and simulated store activities, also a full gymnasium, sensory room, gaming room. It's a comprehensive training center for life and employment skills. And you know, I think community is also a part of this, and that's a huge thing, specifically for people with autism, because it can feel alienating, right? Life happens differently for them, and it's a pretty amazing thing. They even have the PLC cleaning crew that provides real job training in commercial cleaning that leads to paid employment for people who would otherwise have a difficult time finding paid employment. So
I love this. This is awesome.
This is great. They got a charity golf tournament in September to help raise funds to maintain their high client to staff ratio and purchase equipment needed to teach real skills. So it's on Tuesday, September 16th, hosted at Windance Golf Club in Uxbridge. Have you been there, Jesse? Have you?
I have never played there.
Okay.
No.
The early bird special is on from now until July 30th. So that's tomorrow. $225 to register as an individual or $900 as a foursome. Whether you golf or not, it's about spreading support in your community and supporting your community. You can sponsor a hole for as little as $500. Contact info@progressivelifecenter.ca or visit progressivelifecenter.ca for tournament details. Check it out.
On the Kiviranta storyline here, I'm going to read to you guys the top 10 remaining skater free agents based on the points they had last season. So starting from who had the most points to the 10th most.
This is going to be bleak.
Matt Grzelcyk, Jack Roslovic,
Grzelcyk is surprising.
Victor Olofsson. Matt, you can pull this up. Joel Kiviranta, Nikolai Kovalenko, Pat Maroon,
Kovalenko's in the top 5.
Luke Cunnin, Craig Smith, Brett Leeson, and Thomas.
Yeah! Sorry.
And Thomas Tatar. That's 40 points through 17 points that Thomas Tatar had.
Honorable mention to Robbie Fabry, who only played 44 games, I would say.
Sure. Yeah, Robbie Fabry, who had 16 points in 44 games. Matt Grzelcyk had 40 points in 82 games. Roslovic, 39 in 82. Olofsson, 29 in 56. Any name I said there stand out to you guys about being not signed, where you think they could fit in? Any of those 10 names?
Kunin's interesting.
Cunnin.
Yeah, I would say he'll find a way into the league. Roslovic is obviously going to play. So is Olofsson. So is Kiviranta.
Somebody's going to need an offensive defenseman, and Matt Grzelcyk on the power play the only time he was good for the Penguins, I think last year, was on the power play. Someone's going to pick this guy.
People need those kinds of players. I mean, a 40-point defenseman would have to be some kind of bad defensively to not. I mean,
don't worry, he was.
Dude, Tony DeAngelo got a friggin' deal.
Are you surprised that Grzelcyk doesn't have a contract?
I think it's because they want similar cap hit to what he had, or probably more. Look at Connor Timmins just getting, $2.2 million a year. I think they're probably going, Matt Grzelcyk. Like, if Connor Timmins is worth A, then Matt Grzelcyk is worth A+. He's probably wants over $3 million, and teams are probably like, no.
Well, did you see who is it? Dylan Sandberg on the Jets.
Yes.
What was that deal?
So it's not a deal yet. So there's only 2 cases going to salary arbitration. One of them is Nick Robertson, because of course.
There's still time.
There's still time. But Dylan Sandberg is going, like he's going into the process. The Jets have offered 2.5. He has asked for 6.
Oh my God.
He's probably closer to right than they are.
Yeah.
Based on what guys have gotten this summer.
The chasm is very stark. But that's
$3.5 million chasm.
When you think about the process and how everything goes down, it's very reasonable that they're that far apart, because you go in with your super high number, you go in with your super low number, and then that's why you have an arbitrator who hits it right down the middle somewhere. Towards one end.
We'll also hit on some of these stories on Thursday too.
Totally.
Because it's obviously quite thin this time of year. But I do think, you did make a good point, and we won't go into this now. Whatever you think Nick Robertson's going to make, he'll make more.
North.
Yeah.
Adam,
it's going to be above 2, I think.
I think so.
This question is more for you because of where your allegiances lie. Bengin Boy 93 says, what do you think of Mason McTavish? What do you think his new contract will be? Will the Ducks trade him? So Adam, as the Ducks truther who thinks the Ducks are going to make the playoffs, what do you think about Mason McTavish?
So I have already said this. I reserve the right to withdraw my Ducks will make the playoffs prediction.
Bullshit! Absolutely not! No way! Unanimous! Even Maddie's in on this. Bullshit!
My God!
Pat Verbeek's got to be cool.
Boo!
He's got to be cool. Mason McTavish.
Boo! Tomato!
You trade Mason McTavish.
Oh, boo.
Hey, sorry, but if you trade Mason McTavish, they're not making the playoffs. They're just not. What does his new contract look like? I imagine it's going to be short. I imagine it's going to be $5 or $6 million.
What a great podcast we have. It's
Guys,
Jesse Blake, Steve Dangle, and two talking butt cheeks.
I can't.
right here.
Hey, guys.
Two talking butt cheeks.
How can I possibly
Adam's
tell
got
you?
so many ends he's talking out of right now.
How can I possibly tell you
Your
that Mason
cheeks are
McTavish,
flapping.
he is a huge part of what the
my
Ducks are going to
God.
do? How he's the 3rd overall pick from 4 years ago, and
Steve.
if they trade him, they're fucking idiots.
How long? It took like 3 weeks. It didn't even take through the end of July for Adam to back off.
Okay, all right.
We
I got
couldn't
one for
even
you.
get to August with this take.
You're a bum.
Hey,
You
guys,
suck.
You're a bum.
You suck.
One of you predicts that when we do our season previews in September,
Yeah.
one of you predicts the Oilers are going to make the finals.
Sure.
Then you find out Connor McDavid is not going to play this year because he's got a hurt something.
Yeah.
I am not holding you to that prediction.
Oh, yeah, really?
Just
Mason McTavish is a pretty important member of the Ducks, guys.
Can you feel right between my shoulder blades there?
Right here?
Like, yeah, just just down
wow.
the middle of my back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what that's called?
What was it?
Spine.
I knew that was. I could see that coming.
Oh, from a mile away.
Guys,
still
I
good.
think that's a fair. No, it's
you
a fair.
You do have a spine, Steve.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. They'll just make it no matter what.
That makes two of
There
us.
are no factors. They'll just make it. Come on.
Vertebrae. No.
Because one of us went on out on a limb. They walked way out there, and they said the Blackhawks were going to
Yeah,
make
but
the
the
playoffs
Blackhawks didn't
last
have
year.
major injuries. They
And
just
I
sucked, Jesse.
stood-
And we told you
and
they
I
sucked.
stood through that, through thick and thin, and all the way to them finishing at the bottom of the league.
You know-
I didn't back off of it in July.
My favorite part of this last season.
in July either.
Adam, my favorite part of this past season is when Connor Hellebuck started the season good and Jesse went, never mind.
you know,
He backed off the
I
bit.
just was like, he's great now.
Guys, they are a team
Wow.
that is going to be in the wild card if Mason McTavish is there. Okay?
Ducks not so truther.
I'm still a Ducks truther. But, Pat Verbeek makes weird-ass moves. I didn't
Adam
like the
said
Zegers
for
move.
like 3 days the Ducks are going to make the
No.
playoffs, and then on the 4th day
Once
he's
he
like,
signs,
you know what?
I'll be guaranteed.
I don't think so anymore. I got 2 mouths
Ducks
to
fans-
talk of, and one's through my ass.
Ducks fans, back me up. Back me up on this. By the way, Mason McTavish, Zurich, Switzerland.
Cool.
Just shut up.
Cool. Adam.
Shut up. Don't distract us.
No, cool.
All right.
Show us the files. Don't distract
Show us
us.
the files.
Don't distract us.
They got to sign him. But I feel like it's going to be like a bridge deal, and it's going to be like less than Matthew Nyes.
You suck.
don't suck.
I'm not listening to you.
Bro, there's no. What the fuck are you guys talking about? You guys back off shit all the fucking time.
No,
all
we
the
don't.
time.
I never have.
Yes,
I
you
never
do.
have.
Both of you do.
In my entire life.
You know what? If you ever
Not
back
like
off
this.
anything ever again,
No.
I'm throwing a fucking parade down Yonge Street. All right? You guys are that's insane. That's fucking insane. Oh yeah, no. Without Mason McTavish, they'll be just fine.
Jesse, make sure you don't tell the newspaper he's mad.
You are, Adam, you're pre-backing out of it.
I'm not pre-backing out of it. I'm saying they got to sign
Mason
him.
McTavish is still on the team.
No, he's not. He doesn't have a contract.
He's under control.
He's under control,
he's
but they're
still on the
talking
team,
about
and
trading
you're
him.
already backing out of this.
Sarah Volley's on the Bleacher Report going, hey, Mason McTavish looks like he's going to get traded. Dude, that's kind of a big fucking deal, don't you think?
No, I don't.
All right.
I don't agree.
Well, okay. You don't agree. All right. Now we're just being obtuse.
Adam,
Or we could all just be cute like that.
Okay.
how do you get up hills
So
on
they're
your
gonna,
bike
they're gonna get the
going
playoff-
backwards?
Carlson, Strome, and Paling? Okay.
I want to hear the bike question.
How do you get up the hill going backwards?
How?
I'm asking you because you're the backpedaler. Over here.
Do you have any more? Those are good.
Adam's
Oh
favorite
my
player
God.
is No Sam, which is Mason backwards. You see?
No.
We're workshopping it. Oh, fuck you! Fuck all
No, that.
No, I like it because I'm not on Adam's side.
All right, Jesse, you're the last one. You fuck up now.
I've never seen somebody backtrack
I guess
so
you
quickly.
could. I guess I'm looking at the Ducks lineup. You could put Granlund there.
I'm gonna beat you up.
Yeah, no, we're done. I'm asking another question. Last question. Maddie, pull this up. This is from Miro4 North. If every player in the league right now is in their prime, which team wins the cup?
This is a great question.
This is a fascinating thought experiment. Who are you guys?
Can we
think about it a
actually
little?
save that as a topic for next show? Because I'd like to look at that.
Sure, we can come back to it.
Damn.
The research I'll do is probably just like I'll pull up Puckpedia for like 5 minutes.
That's fine. But give me Puckpedia for 5 or 10 minutes.
Like real. Well, here. Do you want me to actually say?
No, I want you to hold off on it for
answer?
next show. Let's save it.
Okay.
Save it. It's a good
I don't know.
one.
I think we can look at Puckpedia for 5 minutes.
Oh no, save it. We need more content for next show.
God.
Trust me, we do. Trust me on this. We'll lead it with that.
You know what, Jesse? I think we should do it now. Wait, no, I don't. That's a great idea. It's actually not. It's
Unless
garbage.
we have a nuanced opinion on this show. Stephen A. Smith 1 and 2 here. No, there can be no nuance. I must hit you with the blunt object. That's fair. That's a fair fucking comment.
Do not tell the newspaper he's mad.
Do not. Please do not report that I'm mad.
Please don't report that.
Please don't print in the paper. All right, we'll end on this one then, because I need a new question. This is from @CFL is fun. Because the SDP is so anti-CFL and we hate the Canadian game with 3 downs and a big football. CFL is fun writes, why do you hate the Winnipeg Blue Bombers?
Oh, I think we only gave the Winnipeg Blue Bombers shit because of Dave Bastel. When he used to come on. But I don't, to be honest with you, and maybe this is worse, I don't really have an opinion. I just don't. It's just not something I pay attention to.
And that, I think, is the majority of people in Canada when you ask them about the CFL
Out west.
outside of the big CFL teams.
Yeah.
There's a lot of apathy for the CFL.
Yeah, I'm just not taken by it. Is that fair?
Yeah. Like, don't go to Saskatchewan, ask them about that.
No.
Don't go to Winnipeg, ask them about that. You know, probably
tear off their
Stampeders.
shirt.
But Edmonton, even like
the Elks are big.
like they got a good fan base and everything, but it's not the biggest thing here in Ontario, to be honest.
It's not.
It's not. No, it's not.
It's not.
No.
It's actually the hugest thing. It's very large.
What?
Sorry.
He's still doing duck spits.
He's doing bits.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, Jesse, you're playing the intro, I hear. Can't wait to start the show.
You know,
You get it? Because
we're not allowed to have intelligent discussions here. You think we're dumb. We're just not allowed to be smart.
you're a fucking asshole.
The Steve Dangle Podcast. Follow the guys on Twitter @Steve_Dangle, @AdamWYLDE, and @Jesse Blake. Connection complete.